All right, welcome in. It is the Breer Report for February the 27th. This is my fourth day in Indianapolis here at the Combine. It's the first day of on-field workouts. The defensive linemen and linebackers get things started on the field at Lucas Oil Stadium. And, of course, you guys have plenty of questions as we turn the page into 2025. Lots of things happening on the veteran market. Lots of things happening with the draft class, of course. And there's a lot to learn about all of these things, and we're going to try to help you do that here on the mailbag. No print mailbag this week. That'll be back next week. And we wanted to give you guys a chance to ask questions, get those questions answered. We'll do that right here. My first question is coming from my buddy Jane Slater. That's at Slater NFL. Jane's from the NFL Network. She asked who wins in a hand-to-hand combat, Ian or Jordan. Jane, I'm not going to answer that question, but I would say that I'm probably more of a Duncan guy. Got to be careful around the Starbucks here in Indianapolis. Our second question for this week from Charles Boswell. That's at Plu Bard. Is there any chance a third quarterback makes it into round one? Charles, I will say this. I do think there are going to be teams out there that have Jackson Dart closer to Shedeur Sanders than the general public thinks he should be. And I think the gap between Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders might not be all that different now than the gap between Shedeur Sanders and Jackson Dart. Does that mean Jackson Dart's going to go in the first round? Probably not. Once you get down to 20 to 25 to 30, there are fewer teams that have quarterback needs. Those are obviously the better teams in the league. So I think Jackson Dart in all likelihood goes somewhere in the second round. But look, I think he's close enough to Shedeur Sanders where if Sanders comes off the board early, you could see a team say, we can't take a chance. Let's jump back into the bottom of the first round, get the fifth-year option, and draft Jackson Dart. Again, not impossible. I don't think it's likely right now, but I don't think it's impossible. And it's going to have to be a need-based thing because the quality of this quarterback group, as we've said over the last couple of weeks and really the last few months, isn't what we had last year, where I think you had three quarterbacks in Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May, who would all be the number one overall pick if they were in the 2025 pool. All right, question number 2 or 3, I guess, since we did include that question from James, from Carlos A. Lopez. That's at Los Talks Pats. Does the depth at the defensive tackle position in the draft potentially push Mason Graham slightly down the board? Thanks. Carlos, I don't think that – I think in a normal year – that would be in play and certainly be possible. I think because of the dynamics of this year's class, there's probably less of a chance of that happening. Here's the way I look at Mason Graham. I think he is not on the level, the blue chip level that Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter are. I think those two guys are kind of in their own category in this year's class. Quarterbacks are separate from everybody else. I think once you get the top two guys to go, wherever the quarterbacks are mixed in there, will determine whether or not now you're at the third pick, the fourth pick, the fifth pick. I think at that point, you're looking at a draft that's very flat. And so, yes, some teams could say, we'll look at Mason Graham, but we don't see him as being, just hugely different than, say, Walter Nolan or his teammate Kenneth Grant or any number of guys that'll be available in the second round. So maybe we should wait in the position and say, take Will Campbell or take take Jalen Walker in the top 5 or top 10. I think the problem with that is there's depth in some of those other positions too, and there may not be a huge difference between the other guys I mentioned and the next guys at those spots. So in a normal year, I could see that logic based coming into play. With Mason Graham. I don't know that it's necessarily going to hurt him too much this year. Could it knock him down a spot or two? Maybe. I also think he's one of the safer picks in this year's draft. I think his translation to the NFL is pretty easy. He lacks some of the measurables you might want in a defensive tackle. He's got shorter arms. He's not as tall as some of the top guys. But I think all in all, when teams look at Mason Graham, they're going to know exactly what they're getting, and there's great value in that in a draft like this one where, again, you may lack the top-end blue-chip guys. Finally, question number 4, this is from Fanatic Dak. That's at Denver D-Mark. After Philly displayed that having an elite running back in Saquon Barkley matters in the NFL, how many running backs are taken in the first round in your opinion? I'm going to put the over-under at 2.5. I think Ashton Genty most certainly goes in the first round. I think Omari and Hampton from North Carolina likely goes in the first round. And then I could see Travion Henderson from Ohio State sneaking in. The reason I see him potentially sneaking in is because I think some teams will look at him and look at the success that Detroit's had with Jahmyr Gibbs, see a parallel, and want the home run ability that Henderson can bring to the table. I think like once you get past those top two, once you get past Genty and Hampton, there's probably three guys in the next group. It's Henderson, it's his teammate Quinshon Judkins, and it's Caleb Johnson from Iowa. Then once you get past that group, you've got another wave of running backs. So I do think like the idea of getting a running back in the first round or valuing the position that way, certainly when you see the way it valuing the position paid off for Philly, paid off for Baltimore, paid off for the Green Bay last year, I certainly could see some teams kind of reevaluating the way that they value the position. But I think there's enough depth this year where teams may not feel compelled to press that need in the first round, where you do feel like, okay, we can get Quinshon Judkins in the second round. We can get Cam Scatabo maybe in the third round or the fourth round. The depth of this year's class, I think, sort of makes it so you aren't going to see some sort of big time run on running backs in the first round. But I do think it means you could see a lot go in the second round, the third round. And I do know some people look at this draft a lot like the 2017 draft, which had Leonard Fournette and Christian McCaffrey at the top, and had guys later on like Joe Mixon that wound up having great careers, Dalvin Cook. I think it's that sort of running back draft. So a really strong group. I think teams are going to evaluate the way they value the position based on what happened with Barkley and Jacobs and Henry as free agents last year. But in the end, I think one thing that's going to prevent a big run in the first round on running backs is the depth at the position, which is sort of the same dynamic we just talked about with Mason Graham. Appreciate you guys coming out. Keep it locked on the mmqb.com for all of our content during Combine Week. We will have our Monday columns, the lead and the takeaways there for you in a few days. Probably another Breer report coming from here or back in my home office. Still working out when you're going to get that, but there's tons more content coming for you from the Combine, and we got a lot more content coming for you over the next few weeks and months, which should be an exciting offseason ahead. The start of the league year is now less than 2 weeks away. The tampering period is 10 days away. Again, so much to cover, and we're going to have you covered here at the mmqb.com. Stay tuned. We'll be there for you.